to do with their sexual orientation. They were in a relationship with someone because they were in love with a person.
Well, then it's
But it was
the other word
all
I'm
about the
looking for.
gender. It was, so if someone transitions from the sex that they were assigned at birth, it is because they don't feel like they identify with that sex.
What did you call that from, I guess, because that would be how they feel on the outside, what's on the
Right.
outside of them.
What's on the outside doesn't match the inside.
And what did you call the outside?
Expression?
Expression, yeah.
Right,
That's
right.
what I'm looking for.
Exactly. So I identify as a woman on the inside. I don't like wearing dresses. So I express masculinely, but that doesn't mean that I don't feel female.
I just like giving up pantyhose, that was great. I mean, that was wonderful. But one of the things I think that you were kind of touching on, and we have an acquaintance and friend that transitioned, got married, had he and his wife doing well, but he transitioned from male to female. And the odd thing now is people are asking his wife, because they did not separate, they stayed together, they're now asking her wife, or spouse, are you a lesbian now? And so it poses for some very interesting, very deep interpersonal questions.
And I think I would have possibly thought that this was her, the wife's second marriage, and she had raised family, so they're now grandparents. So I didn't really question if she was a lesbian. I think, as I said, it was just a little bit harder to wrap my mind around.
And that's a really hard thing for the spouse of a person who's transitioning, because they have to go and accept a new sexual orientation identity. You know, I mean, so, well, I'm in love with this person. I married a man. You know, and that breaks up some couples, and that can lead to higher suicide rates among transgender people when they lose their support system like that. You know, I mean, that's one of the really, really huge contributing factors to suicide among transgender people. And the suicide rates among transgender people, especially youth, are very high. If they haven't succeeded, they've attempted, or, you know, it's because of the isolation. It's because they don't have role models or people they feel safe talking to, or allies like you all. So you guys are here to kind of learn how to be good allies, right? Ultimately, you're the allies to these children, okay?
On the Katie Couric show the other afternoon, she had a parent, and the parent's child was there with her. And she said her daughter came to her when she was 11 years old and says, if you don't let me, if somehow I can't change into a male, at least wearing male clothes to school, this sort of thing, I'm going to kill myself. I can't continue to live this way. And the mom, you know, pretty much replied very intelligently, I'd much rather have a live son than a dead daughter. So if you can imagine how difficult it is for us to wrap around all of this, and especially then when you start dealing with gay and lesbian issues in children that aren't quite sure how they're supposed to react to it, or even what to call it. If it's tough for us, imagine what it's like for them. And they're trying, they're looking to the adults to help them try to get through it, if they're comfortable enough with you to even talk about it.
I'm going to tell you guys, oh, sorry.
It's just a matter of inspiring trust in the kids that you work with.
Right. I want to tell you guys a quick personal story. When I was young in elementary school, I wanted to be a boy. I dressed like a boy. I even wanted to use the boys' bathroom, but I knew that I couldn't do that in school. I got picked on. There was this group of kids that picked on me terribly. They beat me up. They pushed me down. It was a daily occurrence. And when I went to teachers and administrators to try to do something about it, they told me, well, why don't you dress like a girl? Just act more like a girl. Why do you have to act that way? You're kind of inviting them to beat you up. Now, can anybody tell me what was wrong about that response?
Everything.
What message are they sending to me?
You're wrong.
You just don't be yourself and you won't get beaten up, right? If you would just change your fundamentally and act like someone you're not, then you won't get beaten up. So what does that tell a child? That tells you you're bad. It's your fault. You're so despicable and disgusting.
And if
Cover it up.
Right.
If you don't dress right, you're going to get raped.
And yeah, if you don't dress right, and it's your fault.
Exactly.
You know, so
And that still goes on today.
It sure does.
Last year, I had a high school teacher to call out a lesbian in her classroom. And in the classroom is telling her in front of the other students that she's gonna go to hell. And
Right.
of course, everybody gets up in arms and you're trying to get things worked out because the child's hysterical.
What did the school administration do about it?
I don't think they did anything. They got me out of the picture as quickly as they could.
I bet.
Yeah, they got me out of the picture as quickly as they could. So I left it between the mom and the school and what they wanted to do
So
about it.
when would you say is the gender identity is, do you think it's ever finalized, like, is it ever complete? I'm sure that, the adolescents are developing, they're still, going through confusion, trying to decide what they are, what they identify as. So what would you say is about the time that they actually accept, their identity?
That's a really great question. I'm so glad you brought that up. So I'm gonna draw this continuum here. You guys have heard of the Kinsey scale, right? You know what the Kinsey scale is?
Oh, of course.
Well, the Kinsey scale is a measurement of how straight or gay someone is, and it's, Kinsey was a scientist, was it back in the
50s, I think, or late 40s,
something
early
like that?
50s.
So he did experiments to sort of figure out where people are on a continuum of sexual orientation, right? And I think it was a scale of 1 to 6. If you're 1, you're completely heterosexual or completely straight. If you're a 6, you're completely gay. He found no one's really completely a 1 or completely a 6. And then if you're right in the middle, the closer to the middle you are, the more bisexual you are. Well, gender is kind of a continuum as well. So we've got, wait, where's my thing? So cisgender. So if we put it on a scale of 1 to 6, right? Nobody in here is completely like the epitome of their gender all the time, okay? Not a one of us. And to expect people to completely fit inside those boxes is ridiculous. We've got action figures or dolls. They're the same thing, they're dolls, right? Okay. So somewhere on this continuum, right? Usually the kids that I work with, it can change on a daily basis, right? So I almost feel like from my experience, and I'm not speaking from scientific study or anything, from the scientific study of my brain, I think it's fluid and it depends on the day, honestly. And I feel like, especially when your brain isn't finished forming until you're, what, 25, they say?
Mhm.
So I would say things are not as set in stone until you're at least 25.
So this is pretty parallel to other type of identity
Right.
issues. I
Oh,
would
yeah,
say.
absolutely. Yeah, so it falls in to the same,
Like whether or not you're an athlete, or whether
Right.
or not you're
yeah. The longer you do a pattern, I guess, the more you kind of figure out by 25 what kind of, what you're gonna be when you grow up.
It's like some days we feel like Barbie, some days we feel like G.I. Jane. I mean,
Exactly.
it just
Right.
depends on the day and what we gotta do.
Right.
And the mood. So, I
Right.
mean, it varies.
Yes.
Question I know you had kind of touched on about the age when that becomes an issue. I had a case where the foster parent couldn't accept, I guess, that this child, a 3-year-old, preferred to put on the foster parents like top and twirl around and like to play with the doll, and they were stern about trying to no. And I'm like, I don't know a whole lot about it, so I'm
Right.
like, well, this is 3. Let him
Right.
just do what he do.
Right.
It's
See
not.
where he goes with it.
Yeah, but is there a particular time when I guess when the age when you can say, okay, you're probably going to go this way?
I would say you just let them figure it out and be as supportive as you can through the process. As a parent, as an ally, guardian, the kids will figure it out. They will grow into in order to grow into the healthy human beings that they're going to be, they need that room to express the things that aren't even hurting anybody. What's hurting someone to have a little boy who likes to wear dresses and twirl around? what does hurt society is when you're like, no, bad, 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 and then that kid gets a warped sense of himself,
Exactly.
right?
That's what I thought.
Why is it worse in society sometimes for a boy to dress like a girl?
Emasculates him, I think. That it
It's
makes him
sometimes
less
worse, isn't
masculine.
it? Right?
You get so rigid about either or. After 12 years working in the prison system, you can see all kinds of disjointed circumstances that occur. And that can be
Right.
catastrophic for all kinds of folks that have mental issues,
Yep.
have identity issues, have all other kind of issues because we force them into certain roles
Right.
based upon gender expectations.
And they're all broken inside as a result, right?
And they get
Damaged
worse
people,
broken.
damage.
Let me ask y'all this, as you're working with these children, you're pointing out this family, are you looking at the families that are gay and lesbian, transgender children, and which families are appropriate for these children and which aren't?
Problem
Which are-
is DSS makes that determination. Now, sometimes that can be pretty good. Other times, they're not quite as sensitive as some of us would like for them to be about what kind of circumstances.
Do they even
those-
bother to screen for that when they're doing placement?
No.
I mean, is it even, and I know even with DJJ, do you even screen for, because I know you don't really screen for CDV, which is a major issue with our kids, and trying to get them the right treatment that they need and get the family treatment. But are we screening appropriately to get the right foster care or the right placement for these children? They don't have a say-so in it. We're here to fight for them. We're here to make sure that their little lives, that they can turn out to be the best people they can possibly be, given the circumstances that they've been put in. They've been snatched out of their home for whatever the reason, and now they've got to figure out, now what do I do?
And it gets worse because, you know, being in the military for 25 years, and you see those circumstances get worse and worse and worse based upon gender expectations. And they're changing somewhat.
Yeah.
No longer do we take a war hero that is identified as a gay and throw him out on a bad conduct discharge, which means all kinds of terrible things about him.
It does.
We don't do that anymore, but we used to do that. And
But same as criminal,
same thing with
criminalizing.
criminalizing.
Right.
It does. So what can we, as individuals in a group, do to address these situations within the other child care systems to help get a better result for these kids?
I know with, at least for the case I'm talking about, I think one of the main problems is that it's not identified until it's an issue. You know what I'm saying? If you-
Yeah.
They put the child with this foster parent or a family member or whatever, and if it doesn't, until it becomes an issue, and by then, the agencies have a harder time trying to change what's already been put into motion.
So what would be a solution to that? Screening?
Screening, I think that would be, but then how do you
And you just develop a better screening
do you just, off the front ask the question? Is that part of the paperwork? You know, your feelings on this?
It can be, but how do those kids come into care? Isn't it mostly law enforcement is taking those kids into care?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of times, we hear what's going on. We know why this kid's being kicked out or being beaten and all that. We've been to the house several
Then
times.
they're turned over to DSS.
Yes, but does anybody ever call us?
No.
We can't even get invited to the foster care review board hearings.
Why not?
We're excluded from that. I was on foster care review board here in Richland, or there in Richland for a while. And it got to the point where I was having to recuse myself from so many of the cases because I had dealt with the children. And I realized when I asked to sit on the other side of the table that people went absolutely nuts. It was like, oh my God, now what are we gonna do? You know, she dealt with this kid, she's been working with the family. She's gonna tell things that we may not wanna have heard. So they don't invite me to the hearings. They don't invite the officers that do the EPCs to the foster care review board hearings. I encourage all of our officers in Richland to make sure they go to the EPC hearing. If they don't, call me and make sure I go. In fact, I think I got one this afternoon, but they haven't
And
told
we
me.
need to go back and talk to the school resource officers.
Absolutely.
And to the parents, the biological parents, and
Yes.
those things, and see better what's going on.
And they will tell you.
One of my cases was a young lady that was identified lesbian, gay, and what her parents were using her for, both of them were addicts, and they were using her, they were pimping her out.
Oh, gosh, oh,
They were
gosh.
also using her as a runner because she was underage and she could go procure their drugs for them. But she was also in the midst of this, she was still trying to deal with who she was and what was going on with her. And it got worse and worse and worse because there was no one that wanted to take her seriously. When you put her into a group home, you got the same kind of issue with identified
Mentality.
gender expectations. She's female, therefore she is in this particular, well, that's like throwing a kid in a candy store in some kind of situation. And it gets to be complicated and there are no easy answers for it. And nobody wants to take the hard, high road to get to the answers that are there, or at least in supporting the child.
We're here to do that. I mean, I've taken a lot of lumps and bruises over the last 9 years, I guess we've been doing this 10 years. And
You've done
well,
a good
actually,
job.
11.
You
Thank
have
you.
really been a role model for expectations about how to help these kids get beyond where they've been.
We have to. If we don't, who's going to? Right? If we don't fight for them, if we don't help them figure out what's going on in their little lives, who else is going to do it? Who else do they have to turn to? They don't have their parents anymore.
And then
They've
you
got
get
y'all.
discriminated against because you're law enforcement and they expect, there are gender expectations
Mhm.
in law enforcement
Yeah,
about who's who and what's what.
Yeah, I started law enforcement in '74. I was one of the very few females at the academy at that point in time. And yeah, we had gender identification, sexual orientation was, okay, you're
Yeah.
female? What are you doing here?
Yep. Same way in the military.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
So, you know, we kept fighting and we kept going, and I never really had any problems with anybody. I knew what my expectations for myself were. And, you know, everybody, I didn't really have any major discriminatory issues. Never did, never have.
But you are
But-
being discriminated against by not being allowed to be on the foster care review board.
Well, I pull myself off because of that, but they don't invite us. That's what bothers me, is they don't invite law enforcement who has the key information as to why this child came to care to start with. And
How
it's-
can we change that? Can the guardian?
Did you go to the court?
I don't know. I don't know how to change it, because Foster Care Review Board is an entity of DSS.
Right.
I can tell you a good start to changing it. Talk to the South Carolina Equality Coalition, Alliance for Full Acceptance, us. We'll get together a coalition and go talk to, talk to lawmakers, we'll talk to the policy people. We'll get with you guys and strategize together, and go together, and try to get some policies changed.
And that's where it's going to start, is with policy. I mean, it starts with our own personal understanding of what our biases are, and not letting our biases interfere with the care that we give, and working through them. And I think probably everybody in this room has had a struggle at one point or other, but we got past it because the kids are important, the kids matter.
30
So-
years ago, I took a course at Princeton when I was there, based upon the Army sending me there for, I wasn't smart enough for them, so they decided I need to go back to school.
Educate you some more.
There was a course there called Man and Woman, Boy and Girl. And that was the title of the book. And that was the beginning of an understanding that there was about the continuum of gender identification or gender ID that we go through. And it seems to me that when you get to be 70 years old, that there's got to be some changes that have got to be made along the way. Or we keep damaging people who don't deserve to be damaged, beginning with those little kids.
And now we're looking at the issue of GLBT persons in the adult care facilities and nursing homes, and making sure that everybody gets appropriate care. and aren't victimized in some way or discriminated against in some way. So it runs the gamut, from the little ones to our elderly. And, everybody needs protection at some point in our lives, we all do. So we're here to do whatever you need us to do to make things better, whether it's redoing assessments, whether it's looking and giving training to foster home parents, to foster parents. We don't mind doing that. We're glad to do it. Again, it has to be within the confines of a safe space. And saying that, we don't have a few minutes left. Is there any questions that we have not answered yet?
Well,
You got a lot of handout material.
I was gonna, do you mind if I
Jump.
tell them what we got here?
Yes, jump, please.
Okay, so you guys, I knew that we weren't gonna have a whole lot of time to get this stuff, so I have, on the back, you have a resource sheet here that has phone numbers, descriptions, and things like that. There's a GLBT hotline, there's a suicide hotline for youth, our number is on there, South Carolina Equality, and there's a great link here, the Harriet Hancock Center, that it's a link to all kinds of resources. So Harriet Hancock Center website is a great resource for anything you need in this area to find out about LGBT stuff.
I printed out the resource directory and gave it to you.
That's awesome. And on
Let
the-
me underline one thing that you're saying about the suicide prevention type stuff. As a trained counselor and also as a hostage negotiator, quite often the kind of situations we ran into in law enforcement was that a person has been damaged to the point where that they take hostages and then they're going to try to gain control over their life. And suicide is the ultimate way of gaining control over their
Right,
life.
and damage people damage. I mean, on the back of that resource sheet, there's a couple of things, a literature review that you guys, that might be helpful for you. One is transgender family law. This is a guide to family law that is specifically for guardian ad litems. There's a website called glad.org that you can find all kinds of legal resources for LGBT folks. So write that down. I didn't put it on here, I meant to, but GLAD.
Say it again.
glad.org. That's a different organization than GLAAD. That's,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's for guardian ad litems. And another thing that's in your packet is terminology guide, the terminology to avoid with regard to transgender folks. We didn't have time to go over it. My phone number, I actually have business cards. My phone number is on the resource guide. If you have any questions, call me. Any questions about why any of this stuff is offensive or why you shouldn't say it, I'm happy to talk to you about it. And there would be, of course, no judgment. It is a safe, anytime you call, it'll be a safe space, safe phone call. I also put in your packet this terminology guide from the National Transgender Equality Center. And it's just some basic terms the kids are using. Queer is a big term that the kids use, and it's no longer a bad thing. The kids have kind of reclaimed the word queer, and they use it as an umbrella term to mean not straight or not heteronormative. It can mean gender identity or sexual orientation, just to add to more confusion for you guys. But that's pretty much it for me. You guys have any questions for me?
I mean, if you ever need us to speak, all you gotta do is ask, we show up.
Right. Here's some, I have only 10 of these because I ran out of ink.